How will two lovers move on from a past that binds them together? James wakes Tayo while he's sleeping in his fashion house. He asks him what the time is, and Tayo casually replies that it is past 11 p.m. James is irritated by him and warns him severally to stop this attitude of his. Tayo is still shocked at what is happening until James reminds them of the blind date he set him up with. It is then Tayo apologizes, saying he forgot. James is annoyed at this. He tells Tayo it is better he moves on and leaves the past in the past. Tayo also gets angry at the mention of his past. He says there's no reason to bring it up, and James apologizes. Zina is having a meal with her friend, Awela. Awela is so happy to see her. Zina is just coming back from abroad. She asks Zina if she plans to do something now that she's back. But Zina says she doesn't know. She just wants her daughter, Sparkle, to settle down first before she can think of anything. Awela reminds her of her plans before she left the country, but Zina doesn't seem interested in those things anymore. She just wants something good for her daughter. Zina goes to see Awela in her office with a packed breakfast for her. Awela is surprised, and just when she's expressing her thanks, Zina cuts her short and asks her if she knows the whereabouts of Tayo. Awela frowns at her question and tells her she knows nothing about him. Zina starts pleading for her to help, but Awela tells to let Tayo go. It has been a long 6 years since she left, and she just comes back looking for him. He might have even moved on. Zina says she doesn't mind, and she only wants to know how he is doing. Awela reluctantly agrees to help her out, and Zina thanks her excitedly. Zina is telling bedtime stories to her daughter, Sparkle, when Awela calls, and she has gotten the address to Tayo's fashion house. Zina is so happy to hear this, and she thanks Awela repeatedly. The next day, Zina goes to the fashion house owned by Tayo, but doesn't enter. She stays outside for a while, parading the front of the fashion house before she finally leaves. She rushes to Awela to tell her she went but couldn't enter. Awela is pleased. At least she has gone, and she can see he's doing fine for himself, and she can leave him now. But Zina insists she needs to talk to him. Awela concedes to her, but tells her her advice is that she leaves that man alone. After all, she was the one who broke his heart. Zina refuses to listen, and she goes on stalking Tayo until one day the security guard at the fashion house confronts her about what she has been doing here almost all the time. Zina refuses to answer and wants to get into the car immediately, but the security guard stops her. He won't let her leave until she has told him what exactly she has been looking for. In the midst of all this commotion, Tayo steps out to ask what the problem is. Zina runs into her car and winds up her windows as the security guard discusses what was happening with Tayo. He tells Tayo they need to trace the car and report to the police now so she can be arrested, but Tayo says she might just be a customer. Tayo knocks on the driver's side of the window and gently demands she open up so he won't have to call the police. Zina is really panicking in the car, but she finally manages to wind down her window glass after some time. Tayo recognizes her and runs back into his fashion house immediately. Zina runs after him, calling him to wait, leaving the security guard shocked. Tayo runs in and locks the door to the fashion house. Zina knocks, begging him to open up, which he finally does, and asks her what she wants. Zina says she has come to see him, and Tayo replies that since she can see he is well, it is best she leaves now. Zina wants to talk more, but Tayo orders her to leave his shop, which she finally does. Tayo tells James about Zina's visit to his fashion house, and James gets angry. How could she dare show her face to him after all these years? Is she mad? There, Tayo gets defensive and tells James not to insult her at least. James is surprised. After what she did to him, he should still not insult her. Tayo answers yes and walks out with James calling him to come and complete his gist. Zina is telling her mother-in-law that she needs to go see her friend, Awela, and the woman gets shocked. Didn't Awela come to see her yesterday? Zina says yes, but she still needs to see her today. Her mother-in-law says it's no problem. It isn't like she's trying to monitor her movements, but it's just that now that her son, Reginald, has died, she has to take the role of the matriarch in the family. Zina merely nods her head to the talk of her mother-in-law. Awela is so pissed when Zina tells her what her mother-in-law said to her before she left the house. How could she? Zina reminds her the woman might still be mourning her son, and Awela retorts that it has been 3 years, and 3 years is more than enough for anyone to get over it and leave her alone. After all, she's still young and capable of falling in love again. They don't expect her to remain a widow for the rest of her life. Zina does not comment on the talk and just mentions what happened with Tayo. Awela is more than happy this time. She tells Zina it is her sign to move on from everything, but Zina insists she needs to talk and explain things to him. Zina goes to see Tayo at his fashion house, but she doesn't wait in her car again. She goes straight into the house. He asks her for what she's looking for and tells her to go away. Before she can even explain herself, Tayo threatens to call the police if she doesn't leave. Zina begs him, but when Tayo starts dialing the police's number, she leaves. Tayo is going home late at night when he sees Zina in her car dozing off. He's about to leave there, but he comes back to wake her up and tell her to leave. Zina tells Awela about her new encounter with Toyo, and Awela continues to ask Zina why is troubling herself over this Toyo. Zina replies it is him her heart wants, and it won't stop calling for him. Awela sighs as she reveals she might have the address to Toyo's house. Zina is already at Toyo's house and knocking repeatedly while he's trying to sleep. Toyo delays in opening the door and shouts that James should leave him alone. Zina keeps knocking and does not stop, and finally Toyo opens the door and he sees Zina. He's beyond shocked as he stares at her and watches her sneak into his house. He asks her for what she wants, but she doesn't answer. Toyo says he's very tired and wants to be left alone unless she has come to offer sex or massage him. With that, Zina kisses him, but Toyo pulls himself away and tells her to leave. Zina asks if he is sure and continues to tell her to leave. Zina's mother-in-law comes to knock on her door just when she's about to sleep. She asks for what is smelling, and Zina replies that it is a perfume she uses before she sleeps. Zina's mother-in-law comments that it smells so seductive and she's sure Zina used it on her son. Then she pleads with her not to use it outside because men can get attracted to her and they don't want her distracted, especially as she's about to get a role at the company and everything. Zina nods as her mother-in-law talks on and on. When her mother-in-law is about to leave, she tells her she has to go for an old friend's birthday. The poor woman is shocked with everything she has been saying. This girl wants to go to a party? Zina insists she has to go because it is her old friend who hasn't seen her for a long time. Her mother-in-law asks what time the party is, and Zina says it is around evening, towards nighttime, and her mother-in-law asks that she come back early. The party Zina is going to at night is Tayo's fashion house. Tayo is surprised to see her there, but he isn't so shocked anymore. He tells her to go back home, and Zina asks if that is what he really wants, and Tayo doesn't answer. Zina reaches out to kiss him, and there they have sex. Tayo says she must not come back here again, and they have to stop. Zina replies they haven't even started, and he wants them to stop. Zina starts to talk about herself, and Tayo tells her he doesn't care about her story and stands up to leave. Tayo goes home and tells James about what happened with Zina at his house. James is surprised to hear this, although he suspects something was wrong when he told him Zina was back, but he should leave Zina alone because it has been damn 6 years and he's definitely not holding on to those feelings. Tayo says he should have known his feelings for Zina never left and he's still in love with her. Tayo remembers the time he and Zina were still young. He was the broke guy with a sewing machine and big dreams, while Zina was the rich kid. They were going about their love wanting thing until Zina's mother caught them and made sure she cut communication with him. Tayo, on the other hand, was about to register for an entrepreneurship program that will give him a push. He almost didn't register for it because he couldn't talk to Zina, and if not for James's push, he couldn't have done it. James leaves Tayo to reminisce about the past, but comes back to apologize to him about what he had said about expecting him to move on. Tayo says he's right, and in fact, he has no right to be angry with Zina because his father was her father's driver. What were they thinking? It could never work out. Besides, her family being nice to him, and they should have just let it end there. James takes this as a sign to preach to him that he has to move on now. There's nothing with him and Zina, and Tayo accepts. Zina is telling Awela Tayo is refusing to see her. He's not always at home. The door to his office is always locked. There's no way she can reach him. Awela uses this moment to preach again that maybe it is time she let him go. He probably does not want to see her. He's dating someone else. But Zina is past the stage of hearing word. She tells Awela she suffered this past years being without him, and now she can finally chase. She won't stop chasing him. Zina keeps going to Tayo's fashion house every day, even though she's refused entry by the security guard. One day, Tayo finally sees her after work and he agrees to see her. She hops into the car with him and he asks her for what she wants. Zina tells him she wants to leave in denial for a while, pretending they are still together. Tayo subtly agrees and drives around for a while. He tells her how he found out about her marriage on the piece of newspaper he bought akara from. Could she not find a better way to tell him? Immediately he says it is best she starts going home now. It's already very late and Zina says she didn't bring her car and he would have to take her home with him. Tayo refuses sharply. He tells her to take a cab, but Zina refuses. She would rather sleep outside than take a cab. So Tayo had no choice but to take her to his house. There's a bit of argument about where she would sleep, but Tayo insists that she has to sleep in the guest room. Before Tayo is up the next morning, Zina has left his house after leaving a note. She faces the wrath of her mother-in-law who wonders where she went, and she talks about how she was with a friend and had to stay over because it was late. Zina's mother-in-law wants her not to try it again, and Zina agrees. Later, Zina goes to see Tayo at his fashion house, and she's granted access. Zina talks about what happened to her 6 years ago, how she was forced to leave the country and go to the States and marry her husband, and then he died. How her father forced her to do all this, else he will harm Tayo. Tayo apologizes for having to make her go through all that, but they are just both happy it is over. Zina and Tayo start hanging out together. In fact, Zina introduces him to Sparkle, her daughter. One day, while they were eating with Zina's mother-in-law, Sparkle asks when they are going to see Tayo. Zina's mother-in-law is shocked to hear about any Tayo. She tells Zina it is bad for her to be introducing her daughter to anybody and warns her against it. In the night, she visits Zina to say she understands she's human, that has blood flowing in her veins, but nothing must stop her from focusing on her husband's company and daughter. Zina reminds her that she's still young and she doesn't have to be a widow for the rest of her life. But her mother-in-law tells her she married from a respectable family and she has no choice. Tayo invites Zina to his house and they have a nice time. Just when things are about to escalate, Zina pulls away and tells him she doesn't want to hurt him. Tayo is shocked. They are both single, so what's causing the problem? But Zina can't talk, so Tayo terribly tells her to leave his house. Zina goes to meet Awela in tears about what happened. Awela tells her it might be the time for her to take the bull by the horn and face her mother-in-law and also follow her heart. Else, she will be a widow for life. This shakes Zina and she runs back to Toyo and tells him she's ready to be with him now. Toyo is suspicious at first, but he later accepts. Meanwhile, Madam Mother-in-law has been monitoring Zina's movements. She's surprised to see that it is always man's house she's going to and she has been lying to her. She decides she has had enough and confronts Zina when she's back. Zina readily says she's coming back from her boyfriend's house and she cannot be a widow for life. Only if Zina knew her mother-in-law was prepared for her. She sends her packing out of the house the next morning and snatches her daughter, Sparkle, from her. Zina is distraught and Awela has to come help her out. Zina calls her mother and tells her she's tired of being a widow. She has lived the life they wanted for her and now she has seen the love of her life and is ready to live hers. Zina's mother comes to help her to fight off her mother-in-law and takes her daughter back from her. Her mother also apologizes to Toyo for not believing in him and Toyo says it is now in the past. Toyo, Zina and Sparkle finally live happily together.